2024 season is now in the books, but who were the best of the best? We'll talk about all the Eagles that rose to the top on today's show.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black. I'm the editor of Eagle Insider and the host of today's show. On today's show, we're going to talk about accolades. We're going to give out superlatives for the year. But today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Now, during the season, you guys all know Mitch Wolf of Eagle Insider. He's been on our show usually twice a week. During the off season, it's a little harder to find time to get him on here, but we had some ideas that we've been throwing around to get him to guest and talk more BC football. So welcome, Mitch. Mitch, how's it going?
It's going well. Excited to talk about this. I feel like we usually do the show, I feel like a little earlier in December, but I was traveling, so we were a little bit busier, and we obviously were preparing for the bowl game.
Yep.
But this will be a fun show to talk about. We got a lot of interesting awards, superlatives to give out for an interesting season of BC football.
Before we get to that, one quick news item, since I've been talking about this player, Mason Minnie, a tight end from Idaho, who I've been mentioning on the show, committed to Michigan State on Monday night. I think there's other tight end news coming out. If you've been listening to the podcast, stay tuned on that one. Now, all right, Mitch, let's jump into the first one. Let's go backwards. Let's start at the bottom of your list and start with the defensive breakout player of the season. Who do you got?
So this one, I was having trouble deciding between a few, but and also with these awards, I think we're going to try to kind of not give out the same award twice to a certain player or have them rack up a ton of awards just so we can talk about a bunch of different names. But for this one, I would say this one is also kind of cheating, but I think it's got to be the two freshmen, redshirt one, regular the other, safeties in Carter Davis and Omar Thornton. We talked about Carter Davis, going into this camp, he was a corner, and then the week before Florida State, they moved him to free safety, and he was impactful in that game, made a lot of key tackles, and for most of the season, he was flying around a lot. Towards the end of the season, Omar Thornton took some of his starting gigs a few times, which rewatching or thinking about those games, rewatching them, I was like, I'm not really sure if this was the best call, but I mean, Thornton also made some plays in his own right, and Davis was a bit volatile, but I think both these players are going to be very impactful players moving forward. I think that my personal opinion would that preference be that they move Carter Davis to the slot and then have Omar Thornton play free safety. I think that's a bit better for their skill sets, but that's my pick for defensive breakout of the year.
So I'm going to add one to your list that you didn't mention. Now, you brought up freshman, and this guy played a bunch before, but I really think he broke out into another level. I'm going to put Davion Crouch. I think he stepped up to become I think a lot of what we saw at the end of this year, especially watching the Nebraska game again, I feel like he's showing that he can be that guy next year at linebacker. I know you would you make him your earlier this offseason, a guy that you think could be the next best linebacker since Matt Milano?
Like Matt Milano, yeah. Because I think the bowl game definitely proved it. I think he had like 14 tackles or something crazy like that. A lot of stops, a lot of solo tackles. He was flying around everywhere. Obviously, there with him, he's first year starter, so there's still some mistakes. Playing a bit too aggressive at times, has a bad angle here and there, but very athletic, very instinctive player, and I think that's going to be I think it's going to improve even more next year, where he is the guy at the linebacker position. So I think he has a good chance of being an All ACC player, and like I said, probably the best BC linebacker since Matt Milano.
All right, next offensive breakout player of the year.
Again, kind of cheating, and this one more so just because of the circumstances of the position. The first name I'll say is Turbo Richard, and obviously beginning of the year he is rotating with Kairoa Show and Trayshawn Ward, who are senior or graduate student seniors, what have you, and he has some explosive plays here and there. Has a really good performance against Florida State, against Michigan State, and then gets hurt, kind of peters out, and we don't hear from him until the bowl game, and he has some explosive plays there. And tied with him is Jordan McDonald. And again, we didn't really see anything from him for the first half of the year. And then against Syracuse, he just explodes and has a pretty big role in the team in the final month of the season. So I didn't think it was fair to single out either of them as opposed to highlight both of them, because I think they both at different times of the season were the breakout offensive players. Obviously, very different skill sets, but I think they're going to form a very interesting, effective tandem in the backfield next year.
I cannot wait to see what Turbo Richard
Mhm.
does if he stays
Yeah.
healthy, and then he just continues to grow. I mean, if you remember, he did not come in the spring. He was a summer enrollee, so he was only with the team a couple of months when he started to really come out like that. So I'm really excited to see what he does. My breakout star is a little different. Mitch and I are going to disagree on a few of these, and it's not to disagree. It's also a good chance to shout out some players that had some big years. I'm going to say Reed Harris. Um, Reed Harris, obviously, near the end of the season, especially when Grayson James started to come in. He started the season off with a few fluky touchdowns. I think he had the one against Missouri where a defender fell down. But near the end, those were not fluky.
Yeah.
Those were some legit catches that he made. And I really think he solidified that second wide receiver spot opposite of Lewis Bond, the one that we thought was going to be Jerron Bradley, and now he's gone. So I think everyone knows the story of Reed Harris, quarterback who transfers over. Commits over to BC, moves over to wide receiver / tight end. Played a lot of wide receiver, tight end by the end of the season. He wasn't playing any tight end by the end, was he? He was all wide receiver.
They kind of motion him in where he's kind of he's like a wing alignment. So, and that's actually what he's coded as for PFF and True Media. So it kind of skews a lot of their personnel usage and stuff like that. Like for True Media, when they look at personnel like 11, 12, 13, whatever,
Yep.
BC is number 1 in 13 personnel usage by a wide margin because Reed Harris is coded as a tight end in their system. So, but that's a bit of a fluke. Also, for what it's worth, when I wrote these are 2025 breakouts. So these are kind of predictive of next year, which I honestly kind of forgot about until I reread them. And for that reason, that's why I picked these two instead of Reed Harris. Because Reed Harris is kind of already broken out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh,
So,
I read these wrong.
I honestly, it's my fault. I honestly forgot about it too. And so,
anyways,
yeah. But so I think, like I said, like McDonald and Richard next year will be a big tandem. You kind of we've seen the Reed Harris breakout basically. Yep. And then the safeties, they were rotating, kind of figuring out what positions they fit best in. I think next year, as they kind of orbit around KP Price, who's already a really good player, they'll settle into roles and they'll be set for a big breakout next year.
Is it safe to say that?
But even your pick of Davion Crouch, I think that's based on this criteria, I think still a perfectly great fit based on how we said he's going to be an all-ACC player next year.
So if we're talking breakouts for next year, is it safe to say like Jaden Skeet hasn't broken out yet?
I would say so, just because, he had some moments at the end of 2023. He might have been somebody I would have said for 2024, and it never really happened. Even though he was, based on the passing odds, he was still pretty high on targets and receptions and yards and everything, but just didn't play at the end of the year. And it's just never really clicked, not necessarily because of him, but just they couldn't really figure out the best way to use him with Thomas Castellanos as quarterback. I think with Grayson James, I think he could be due for a bigger role. So he could qualify for it as well. But I would agree. We haven't seen that breakout from him yet.
All right. In a moment, we're going to have to continue. And this might be a 2-part show because we're already way behind. In a moment, we'll talk more about some players that were unsung heroes, players that were big. Unsung heroes, surprises, and our MVPs. We'll get into all of that in just a moment. Attending the new 12-game college football playoff game is an incredible experience that brings fans together like never before. I remember the excitement of past playoff games and can't wait to make new memories with the updated format and extra teams involved. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I used Game Time Picks to find Boston College tickets for an upcoming game. Browsing through the deals was a breeze, and I found great value for all kinds of seats around the venue. Took my entire family. It was a great time. The Super Deal in particular stood out as the best value for the event. I love that I could see the seats views before buying, and that app shows the front cost right away with no surprise fees at checkout. Plus, the on-time ticket delivery and lowest price guarantee gave me complete peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Locked On Boston College, AJ Black here with Mitchell Wolf of Eagle. We're both of Eagle Insider. And we're talking about end of the year awards. We're giving our superlatives out. And we started off with looking ahead. But now let's talk about some surprises. And let's talk about the biggest surprise on offense and defense. I'll let you do both.
All right, my defensive one is Joe Marinaro, and this is kind of a cop out because if you pick a guy who's never played defense in 4 years at BC and stayed in his fifth year, yeah, he's going to be a surprising player. It's like, well, that means something really bad happened, and it did. BC was decimated with injuries at the linebacker position, but Marinaro came in, and I was very concerned about what he was going to bring and if he'd be a liability on defense. And his first game was SMU, and he looked fine. And then obviously North Carolina, he has this huge game where he has the interception and forces the fumble on a kickoff return, has a bunch of tackles, and generally plays well to end the year. So, just a guy in terms of when you look at the roster and you think about what you expect from the season. I never expected to be talking about Joey Mott Sticks at all this season, but the fact that he was a really cool storyline to end the year makes that the biggest surprise for me on defense. On offense,
can I jump in on the defense?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yep.
So that's funny too, because going to practices and hearing the coaching talk, you hear so much about them talking about, yeah, so-and-so is great on special teams and blah, 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 blah. And then when they get in and they put them in on offense or defense, it's like, it's not a good fit. They talked so much about Joe Marinaro over the summer, and I watched him and he looked fine, but to actually see him go out and do what he did, was very impressive. It would have been nice to win against Nebraska, because with him out there, with no ankles and an arm that's
looking like a mech, or one of the machines that the people walk around in the Matrix or Avatar or something.
Basically, that would have solidified his legend at Boston College, because that would have been it right there. But he didn't get it. Still a great story for
perfect game for him to go out though, with just the muddy field and just sliding around. His jersey's dirty as all heck. And my offensive surprise, it should come as no surprise given how we talked about him going into the season. It's Grayson James, because I was very skeptical of his ability to come in and do anything with this offense based on what I saw from his time at FIU. And he proved me wrong, because after the West Kentucky game, which was a bit rough, once he got to be the starter to replace Castellanos, he got better in every game. The bowl game was a little rocky, but I'm not going to put that all on him because of the offensive line issues. But good passer, has a bit of a running ability to extend plays and get out of some jams, and generally sees the leadership role of this team, and that was really important at the time. And you hope that he can kind of break this cycle of quarterback development that's been a problem at BC for the last decade, and he can, maybe besides Anthony Brown, but you hope that he can come in next year, stay healthy, be the starter, and then let the rest of the room develop behind him, because he did everything that was asked of him this year and then some. And I'm happy to eat crow about being wrong about him, because he was a pretty good player to end the year.
So on Eagle Insider today, I was doing a depth chart of projecting ahead what the depth chart would look like, and I found my old one from last spring, and I was reading my comments on Grayson James, and I believe the words I wrote was, hopefully we don't have to see him unless Thomas Castellanos gets hurt. And I missed on that one, but I did say he looked great during the spring. That's what I said before. I said he looked great, but hopefully we don't have to see him. But yeah, he was everything you'd hope for. Definitely would eat crow on this one, because he won 3 out of the last 4 regular season games. I don't count the bowl game.
And very competitive against a college football playoff team on the road, in his first road start against a power conference team. And they were in that. The final score does not tell the full story of that game, because BC was only down by a field goal at that time, and they scored with a touchdown with 5 seconds left, because they had to on 4th and 1 from the 5 or something. So yeah.
Yep. All right, let's move on next to our Unsung Hero Awards. And let's do both of them again. Let's do offense and defense. Go ahead.
All right. Offense for me is tight end Kamari Morales. And I guess it's kind of hard to say he's unsung, given that he led the team in receiving touchdowns, was their second leading target getter, I think. Definitely second leading in terms of receptions, and I think third in yards. I'm just going off the top of my head with that. But was a key presence in the red zone. It was an interesting usage of the tight end room this year, because, for the last few years, they've tried to kind of have the one guy. Usually it was George Takis, but he had injury issues and drop issues. And, we'll get to this other player later, but the Titans didn't commit a single drop this year, and they had some times where they lost contested catches, but that's very different. But if you think about back to 2023, where they were just committing bad drops all over the place, none of that this year. Key clutch catches in big situations. Improve, maybe not as great of blockers, but still solid. And Kamari Morales was a big part of it. And just a great guy to hear talk. He only was here for a year, but really understood what it meant to play for BC. And wish he could have stayed longer because he was a really cool player and was a really fun part of this offense.
I'm gonna go with a running back here because I think, though I could also say one of the offensive linemen. I mean, we could say Jack Conley here if you want to, but I won't.
We could. I'm not going to, but we could.
I'm gonna say Kai Robichaux because he got the crap kicked out of him all year long for 2 years straight. They just ran him. And he never did anything like super flashy out there. Like everything was always there. And this year, especially, it didn't feel like he had a ton of explosives, but he did what you needed him to do. He had that one. I think he probably only had a couple fumbles, but I can remember the UNC game where he got hit right in the ball.
Yeah, I mean when he's fumbled, because the other one was when Justin Barron decleated him against Syracuse in 23, and there might have been another one, but I can't remember. But every time it's been like, well, that happens. That was just a perfect hit by the defender.
So he, not the flashiest running back you've ever seen, but I wanted to put him down just because I appreciate what he did all year.
Yeah, tough yards personified. All right, so for defense, I'm going to go with slot corner Kari Johnson, and especially earlier in the year, because I think towards the end of the year he was dealing with some injuries, which kind of is the story of his career, unfortunately. But in the beginning of the year, I made a lot of plays. Very solid run defender, was a lot better than he was in 2023, and obviously didn't have the salmon jumping out of the river play this year. He did get ejected for targeting once, but I didn't really understand. I didn't agree with it at all. But was pretty solid in the slot. It wasn't this major liability for BC. And when they went with other players, it was a bit of a problem. So I was like, it always confused me why they kept rotating him out. But he was pretty solid, especially in the first half of the year. Towards the second half of the year, he was hurt, wasn't playing as well. But I thought he did a pretty good job in the first half of the year to lock that position down and make it not a major liability for the defense.
I'm going to put down, I like your Kari Johnson one. I'm going to go with Max Tucker here. Max Tucker was he perfect? No. But there was a lot of talk about him coming out of camp. Amari Jackson goes down week 5, I think it was, with the knee injury. All of a sudden, the cornerback position is completely in flux. Tucker gets the interception against Michigan State to win the game. He had a couple other big plays in there. Just a solid season, nothing spectacular again, just like I said with Kai, but it was his first year starting, and I thought at times he looked like a first year starter, but honestly, I thought he, for his first full year, looked like a guy that belonged out there.
I think the guy who had the toughest job for most of the season, and especially after Amari Jackson went down, and the guy who then didn't completely fold under that pressure. Like you said, it wasn't perfect. He had some rough games here and there, but it wasn't a major liability that he was, the team's cornerback one for most of this season.
Right. And so he could, when Amari comes back next year, he slots in the cornerback too. And you're feeling pretty good with what he can give you at that spot. So in a moment, Mitch and I got to wrap things up. We actually are doing pretty good here. Actually, no, we're not. 5 more.
No. We'll get through the ad quickly. And we got it. Don't worry.
All right. Let's go. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets. Guaranteed, that's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. With the NFL playoffs coming up, I am going to be hitting those parlays hard. I'm going to be waiting for that wild card weekend. We don't know what's going on with Zay. I've been talking about getting my Zay Flowers anytime touchdowns, but it looks like he's probably going to miss that first week.
You're going to wait for that one.
Yeah, but there's other ones out there, and you can get those on FanDuel. So visit the website and make sure you go to FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Locked On Boston College, wrapping things up here with Mitch. We're giving our accolades at the end of the year, but when you're done with this episode, go check out Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin. Lots of stuff going on right now. He's got it all covered on Locked On College Football on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, The next one we have here is our most improved players on offense and defense. Who do we got?
So I'm going to switch gears and I'm going to say that the most improved player was Sam Kendati. Just kidding. So my most improved defensive player, I'm going to say defensive end Quintavious Hutchins because based on what I had seen from him in previous years, the fact that he had switched between tight end and defensive end multiple times, he had pretty much only played special teams. When he was basically being elevated to being the starter across from Donovan Saraku, I was very, very, very worried. I was like, why are they doing this? I know Neto Ekpala is not having a great year, but I just don't get this. I don't think he's a Power 5 athlete. And he proved me wrong again. And, got more playing time and obviously wasn't Donovan Saraku, but was in enough of a position to take advantage of the opportunities that Donovan gave him, because the offenses were so focused on taking Saraku away that afforded Hutchins some opportunities to make some plays, and he took advantage and was pretty good. I think he ended up tying Akpala for pressures. Obviously came in second in sacks on the team. Big game against Syracuse, which was huge for helping them secure that win. And again, I'm not sure he's not going to be Saraku next year. I'm not sure he's going to be like the guy as a pass rusher, but he's a solid starter at the defensive end position that can get you through a season you can rely on.
All right, in the offensive side, I'm going to agree with you on that one. I just like Marinero and even Grayson James. Like, this was a guy I watched during practice, and yeah, he made a lot of plays during practice, but I kept writing it off like, yeah, it's practice. He's not going to do this during regular season, and he did. And he had, again, some big plays out there. He had interceptions, fumble recoveries, sacks. He was all over the place. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, who do you got?
I'm going to go tight end Jeremiah Franklin. And again, I'm highlighting the tight ends here because I thought they had a pretty solid season as a combined pair. And Franklin is a guy that, especially, I'm kind of cheating here again. I'm taking it almost since 2022, even 2023. It's a big bridge. But if you look at the progression of him as a player, where he comes in as 2022, is this kind of wide receiver tight end hybrid. But then basically because of the injuries to Takis and the rest of the tight end group, they have to end up playing him in line more. And he's really struggling as a blocker. And he's even struggling as a receiver at times. He has some drops. 2023 comes around. Takis is back. He's your blocker. Franklin's making some plays here and there, but he's still having some issues as a blocker, has some drops. This year, Franklin is a big, huge weapon in the offense. And honestly, if Morales hadn't been there, you'd think that he could have gotten more targets and more use in the receiving room, but he was awesome. Much better blocker, even in pass protection, which is something that tight ends sometimes struggle with. And you're going into next year with him as the tight end one, and you're feeling pretty comfortable with that. You think, okay, if he can just keep improving, maybe not, he's made huge strides, so there isn't as much room to go. But if he can, keep refining the nuance of his game as a route runner, as a blocker, you're like, okay, this is a good tight end that BC can feature in their offense and have be like the number 2 or 3 target in this offense behind guys like Lewis Bonnet and Reed Harris.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I think that in terms of improvement, he's got to be the number one. I would also put up there anyone on the offensive line you would put in terms of improvement.
It's tough with them because this is the case kind of with a guy like Davian Crouch or KP Price, just because we didn't see them enough where I can say, okay, this was where they were and then they're here. We just didn't really have enough evidence to know. Whereas frankly, we've seen a ton of the last 2 years and we've seen that progression and growth.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, but I'm not going to say that about Jack Conley.
Okay. All right. I'm not going to let you. Our Jack Conley slander ends today. No. Anyways, most outstanding. So we're going to have 3 more to go. And before you all jump all over Mitch, before I give this one, it's most outstanding defensive player, most outstanding offensive player, and team MVP. So, Mitch, who's the most outstanding defensive player?
These should be pretty predictable, especially for me. Most outstanding defensive player was Cam Horsley, and again, we're keeping one award per person, so you can see where this is going. But I thought Cam Horsley had a fantastic final season for BC, especially as a run defender. Obviously, transitioning to more of a nose tackle role, wasn't as much of a pass rusher. Had some pressures here and there, but I don't think he had any sacks. But he batted a lot of passes down. Was immovable in run defense. Was fantastic in that role. Like Michigan State game was like elite tape, really good against SMU too before he got hurt. I obviously kind of towards the end of the year, he couldn't play as much just because of that injury, which was a shame, but really good player that really developed into an interesting story for BC. And I just love watching him play as somebody who enjoys trench play and, kind of likes some of those nitty gritty, dirty players where it's like, you're not going to see them on stat sheet enough, but they're playing really well if you focus on the right things and watch the tape.
Yeah, the last 3 I think are hard to argue. The most outstanding offensive player.
So for this one, I'm going to go Ozzie Trapillo. consistency. Thy name is Ozzy Trapilo. Like the guy is just a really good offensive tackle. I think the 2 sacks he gave up this year, I remember watching them. Okay, this is a miscommunication, pass protection. He's not getting beaten. Held his own against Antoine Powell Ryland. Just a really solid player in all aspects of the game. You can rely on him to do anything and be solid against pretty much every opponent. And yeah, so that's why it's pretty clear. Like, Lewis Bond maybe has an argument here, but I think there were just some games where he kind of disappeared or had some mistakes that I think were not as bad as Trapilo's. And I would say none of the running backs, because of the timeshare situation they were in, none of them really stood out as much. And obviously the quarterback situation was what it was.
Yep. I'm going to go with the same there. And then team MVP, obviously.
I've let all these ones off. Do you want to leave this one off?
Sure, I got this one. There's no surprise here because the team MVP is one of the best players Boston College has had in the last decade. He broke records. He won every award. Not every award he could win, but he won quite a few awards. He's All-American, All-ACC. It's edge rusher Donovan Azaraku. What can you say about this guy? He went from 2.5 sacks last year to 16.5. A new scheme, yes, but a attention to his craft and the way that he played this season was, one of the best stories Boston College has had in years.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And obviously unanimous pick here. And ACC Defensive Player of the Year, Ted Hendricks Award winner for Defensive End of the Year. And with his sacks, I think I would say like some of them, they kind of bunched up in certain games, but with Donovan, you could pretty much always rely and especially in close games when BC like really needed a sack or a pressure, and like he was going to do it, even if he was getting double teamed. And for some reason in those situations, sometimes teams wouldn't do that. And I would just say, why are you just letting this guy go 1-on-1 against your offensive tackle? And he would pretty much always beat them. And obviously still incredible as a run defender, had some forced fumbles, I don't know if he batted passes, but his key forced fumbles this season.
Western Kentucky, right?
Basically, almost single-handedly won the game against Western Kentucky and had some big plays against Syracuse to help them come back and win that game. Definitely a guy going to miss. And like you said, attention to his craft. And that's the thing that sticks out to me most is for him as a prospect. And this is what I've been reading and hearing about him as a prospect. And I would agree with it, is that there's nobody else in this draft class at the edge rusher position that has a deeper bag of pass rush moves. And that's something that, some body types, you have certain moves that you can do and other guys can't. But for the most part, the pass rush moves are like you working at your craft and adding moves to your arsenal that you can string together and use to counter what the offensive line is doing. And you can string them together and you have a combo basically to beat an offensive tackle. And Azaraku has, 10 moves he can go, like a ton of different moves he can go to, which is just insane to watch. You watch him in any game and you'll see 3 to 5 completely different types of moves with his hands, with his body, that you just don't see in another game or really anybody else. You see all these guys that are tall, long, and bendy, and they'll just try to get around the edge or long arm off tackle. And Azaraku is part of it. Is some of that he can't do, but he's responded to that by saying, okay, I'm going to add all these things that I can do with my hands that can defeat offense tackles in other ways. And that's just super impressive to see. And clearly a guy that was very highly respected by his team. You saw a lot of like the videos of him getting awards and everybody celebrating him. And if you'd asked like about him in the media availabilities and people on the other side of the ball or on the defense talk about him, everybody would just sing his praises roundly. So, like you said, one of the best players BC's had in the last 20 years or 10 years, I would say 20 years, based on how good this season was. And again, a progression from last year where he was getting taken away a lot. He didn't have as many of those moves in his bag, and then he added those and turned into a transcendent player.
All right, that's going to wrap up our conversation. Mitch, where can people find your work?
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolf, WOLFE on Twitter. You can check out my work at Eagle Insider. Things are slowing down, but we have the film reviews from the bowl game. I'm working on some of these season end pieces right now. I will have the statistical review coming out soon. So we're on that. A lot of numbers to parse through. And then we're going to start getting into some other film stuff. Like I want to kind of look at some of the plays that define BC's season, more so the schematic ones. We're probably going to do an episode where we talk about those bigger moments from a story standpoint, but I want to talk about, the schemes that BC used all year that kind of defined what they were doing on both sides of the ball. So keep your eyes on Eagle Insider for that in the future.
And transfer portal season is still heating up, and recruiting is going to pick up soon as they're in a contact period. And we have that all on Eagle Insider. I dropped a huge nugget on a potential transfer that you're going to want to know about over on Eagle Insider right now, and where BC stands with him. You want to make sure you get over there, check that out. I'll be back again tomorrow for another episode of Locked On BC. We'll be talking everything news related and everything else going on with BC. For Mitch, this is AJ. We'll see you all again soon on Locked On Boston College, your team every day.